It is 2,500 years ago, high in the mountains of Central Asia. A group huddles around a small brazier of glowing stones. Someone drops a handful of plant matter onto the heat. Smoke curls up, and in the archaeological record, at that exact spot, we find the chemical fingerprint still there, thousands of years later. This isn't a guess. This is some of the oldest clear evidence we have of humans deliberately getting high, and the story behind it is older still. I want to be clear about what this video is and isn't right at the top. This is a history video, an archaeology video. We are going to travel back thousands of years and stand in some genuinely astonishing places and look at what humans actually did and why. What this is not is a how-to. I'm not here to tell you to do anything. I'm here to tell you a story about our species, and it is a far stranger and older story than most people realize, because here is the thing nobody tells you. The relationship between humans and this particular plant is not modern. It is not a recent habit. It is not something from the last century or the last few generations. It reaches back into the deep past, into the Bronze Age and beyond. And when we find it in the record, we almost never find it at a party. We find it in a grave. We find it in a grave. We find it in an altar. We find it in the single most serious moments of ancient human life, right at the boundary between the living and the dead. And by the end of this, I want you to understand not just when this started, but why this plant, out of all the plants on Earth, sank its hooks so deeply into us. Let's start with the plant itself, because it is older than us. Cannabis is an ancient plant, and its wild origins trace back to the steppes and mountains of Central Asia, that vast sweep of high grassland and rugged peaks that runs across the heart of the continent. It grew there long before any human thought to use it, and when humans arrived and spread across that landscape, they would have encountered it the way they encountered everything, by trying it, by burning it, eating it, testing it, the way our ancestors tested every plant they ever met, cataloging the world one experiment at a time. And I want you to really appreciate what that process was like, because it is easy to forget how our ancestors actually built their knowledge of the world. They didn't have books. They didn't have a chemistry lab. They had their own bodies and each other, and a brutal system of trial and error stretched across countless generations. Somebody, at some point, ate every single plant in their environment, at least once, to find out what it did. Some of those experiments ended in a full belly. Some ended in sickness. Some ended in death and became a lesson passed down. Not that one. Never that one. This was the original science, written in the only ink they had, which was experience, and sometimes tragically in lives. And out of all that testing, a tiny handful of plants stood out. Not because they filled the stomach, but because they did something to the mind. They changed how the world looked or felt or sounded. To an ancient human with no concept of brain chemistry, that was not a minor curiosity. That was closer to magic. A plant that could reach inside your own head and rearrange your experience of reality was one of the most extraordinary things in the entire world. And those plants, unsurprisingly, got remembered, got protected, got sacred. Most plants do nothing dramatic. A few make you sick. A very small number do something strange to your mind. And those the ancient world noticed. Those it never forgot. So let's go to the evidence, because this is where it gets remarkable, and I mean genuinely hair-raising remarkable. Let's go back to that mountain scene, because it is real. High in the Pamir Mountains, at a site called Jirzankal, archaeologists excavated a cemetery dating to roughly 2,500 years ago. And among the graves, they found wooden braziers, small containers, with burnt stones inside. When researchers chemically analyzed the residue left on those braziers, they found it, the signature of cannabis, and not the weak, wild kind. The chemistry suggested plants with a higher potency than typical wild cannabis, which means these people may have been selecting for exactly the effect them to select for. Now picture the setting, a burial high in the mountains, a brazier of hot stones, the plant placed on the heat, the smoke rising in an enclosed space, around a grave, almost certainly accompanied by music, by ritual, by the presence of the dead. This was not casual. This was a ceremony. The smoke was a bridge, a tool to reach somewhere the ordinary mind couldn't go. To commune with the dead or the divine or the ancestors. This was, as far as the physical evidence takes us, one of humanity's oldest confirmed highs, and it happened in a cemetery as an act of the sacred. But we can go further, and we can get even more vivid travel to the Turpan Basin, in what is now western China, a bone-dry desert where the arid conditions preserve organic material with eerie perfection. In the ancient Yanghai tombs, archaeologists found a burial containing a large quantity of cannabis, preserved so well it could still be studied in detail thousands of years later, and at a nearby site, another grave that stops you cold. A man laid out in death with 13 whole cannabis plants placed across his body like a shroud. The plants arranged diagonally over his chest, roots by the pelvis, tops reaching up toward his chin, 13 whole plants. Chosen, harvested, arranged over a human body with care for burial roughly 2,500 years ago. You do not do that by accident. You do not do that for a plant you use to make rope. That is a plant being treated as sacred, as meaningful, as something that belonged with a person at the threshold of death. Whatever these people believed this plant was, it was important enough to send into the ground with the dead. And think about what that burial actually tells us beyond the shock of the image. It tells us this plant was woven into their understanding of death itself. Remember, across this whole channel, we keep coming back to the same profound truth. What a people places in a grave reveals what they believe a person needs for whatever comes next. A tool means they thought the dead would work. Food means they thought the dead would hunger. And this plant, laid like a shroud across a body, means these people believed it had a role to play at the very threshold between worlds. It wasn't a possession being stored. It was, in their minds, a piece of essential equipment for the journey of the dead. The same doorway it opened in the minds of the living. They seem to have hoped it would open for the dead as well. That is about as serious as a relationship with a plant can possibly get. And then there is the written word, because eventually humans start telling us, in their own voices, what they were doing. Enter one of my favorite recurring characters on this channel, the ancient Greek historian Herodotus. Writing around 2,400 years ago, Herodotus described a people called the Scythians, fierce nomads of the steppe, and he described a practice that, for centuries, people assumed he'd exaggerated or made up. He wrote that the Scythians would take the seeds of this plant, crawl into a small enclosed tent, and throw the seeds onto red-hot stones, where they would smolder and smoke and produce a vapor. And the Scythians, he said, would howl with joy at the experience. For a long time, this was treated as one of Herodotus's tall tales. The man had a reputation for collecting wild stories. But then archaeology went digging on the steppe and found the kits. Small tent frameworks, braziers, burnt stones, the physical apparatus of exactly the ritual he described, sitting in the ground, confirming a 2,400-year-old account in stunning detail. Herodotus wasn't exaggerating, he was reporting. The ancient world really was doing this out on the open grassland in enclosed tents thousands of years ago, and I love this moment in the story because it is a perfect example of something this channel keeps running into. We have a habit of assuming the ancient world was simpler, more naive, less sophisticated than ours. We read an old account like Herodotus, and our first instinct is surely he made that up. Surely it wasn't really like that. And then the dirt gives up its evidence, and it turns out the ancient people were doing exactly what they said they were doing, with more intention and more skill than we gave them credit for. The Scythians weren't stumbling into a vapor by accident. They had a whole technology for it, a designed enclosure, a method, a purpose. They had engineered the experience deliberately and built a ritual around it that held for generations. That is not naivety. That is mastery of a kind we keep underestimating. And notice, again, where it lives, not scattered casually through daily life, but bound up with the nomadic warrior culture of the steppe, tied to grief, to celebration, to the marking of death, to the great communal moments that held a roaming people together. The pattern holds. The plant keeps showing up exactly where the sacred and the serious are. So step back and look at the pattern, because it is the same pattern we see with so many of these ancient substances. This isn't recreation as we'd think of it. Again and again across separate cultures, this plant shows up tied to ritual, to burial, to the sacred, to the attempt to reach beyond ordinary experience into something bigger. The high wasn't the point in the way we might assume. The high was a doorway, a tool, a way to touch the world of spirits, of ancestors, of gods, which brings us to the real question, the one underneath the whole video. Why this plant? Why did this particular species, out of the tens of thousands our ancestors sampled, carve out such a deep and lasting place in human life? Why did it work on us at all? And now let me throw something at you that might sound wild, but is one of the most fascinating facts about your own body. The reason this plant affects you is that your body came pre-built with the locks that its chemicals happen to be keys for. You have running inside you right now something scientists call the endocannabinoid system. It is a network of receptors woven through your brain and body, and it helps regulate all sorts of fundamental things: mood, appetite, pain, memory, stress. And it is called the endocannabinoid system because of how it was discovered. We found it by studying how this plant works. Sit with the strangeness of that. Your body produces its own natural compounds that fit these receptors. They're part of your basic operating system, and they were there long before any human ever encountered the plant. The plant, over its own evolution, happens to produce compounds shaped closely enough to slip into those same receptors. So when the smoke rose off those hot stones in the Pamir Mountains, it wasn't introducing something alien to the human body. It was reaching into a system that was already there, already running and turning its dials. The key was ancient. But so was the lock. They were, in a sense, waiting for each other, and here is the part that genuinely bends my mind. The plant did not set out to affect us. It didn't evolve those compounds as a gift to humanity or as a lure. Evolution has no plan and no intention. Those compounds almost certainly evolved in the plant for the plant's own reasons, having nothing to do with us, perhaps to deter certain insects, perhaps to cope with intense mountain sunlight, perhaps for reasons we still don't fully understand. It is very likely a cosmic accident that the molecules a plant produced for its own survival happen to be shaped like the very keys that fit locks inside the human brain. Two completely separate evolutionary stories, the plant's and ours, running for millions of years on opposite sides of the living world, and then meeting at a single point of chemical coincidence. When our ancestors burned that plant and felt their minds shift, they were experiencing the payoff of that accident. Two unrelated branches of life, folding together by pure chance into a lock and a key. They had no way to know any of that, of course. They just knew that this plant uniquely could open a door in the mind, and a door in the mind to an ancient human meant a door to the other world. That is why this plant, and not 1,000 others. It didn't have to invent a way into us. It found a door that was already built. And once our ancestors discovered that a particular plant could reliably swing that door open, that it could shift mood, dull pain, alter perception, bring visions, they did what humans always do with a powerful and mysterious tool. They wrapped it in meaning. They gave it a place in their rituals. They carried it to the edge of death and laid it beside their dead, hoping it could do there what it did in life, open a door to somewhere else. Now we have to talk about the turn this story takes, because it doesn't stay in the temple. Here is the uncomfortable part. For most of this history, the plant was hedged in by ritual. It had a time, a place, a sacred purpose, a set of rules. It wasn't just lying around for any moment, and that matters because ritual is a kind of container. It puts limits and meaning around a powerful thing. The ceremony decided when and where and why and how much and for what purpose. Those constraints weren't arbitrary. They were, in a sense, the accumulated caution of a people who understood they were handling something potent and who built guardrails around it out of respect and self-preservation both. But as the ancient sacred world gave way to the modern one, that container gradually broke. The plant slid out of the temple and into the market. What was once a carefully bounded ceremonial act became, over the long centuries, a commodity, something to be sold, taxed, banned, criminalized, argued over, and consumed in a very different way, stripped of the ritual that once surrounded it. And I'm not here to preach at you, or to tell you what to think about any of that. This channel doesn't do that, but I will be honest with you, the way I always try to be. Any substance that reaches into your brain and turns its dials is a serious thing. Ancient or not. Or ancestors seem to have understood that instinctively, which is exactly why they surrounded it with so much ceremony and care, why they reserved it for the biggest moments rather than the smallest. The reverence was a kind of wisdom, and if this is something you or someone you love struggles with, there is no shame in it at all. It is a very old relationship and a genuinely powerful one, and reaching out for support when a powerful thing gets its grip on you is one of the most human moves there is. I'll leave that there. So when did humans first get high on this plant? And here is the honest answer, the one this channel always owes you. We have that hard evidence, the braziers, the burials, the residue, reaching back roughly 2,500 years. That is what we can prove chemically, physically, beyond doubt. But the honest truth is that the real first time is almost certainly far older, and we will probably never find it, because here is the problem. The evidence of getting high is fragile. Smoke disperses. Residue degrades. A person chewing a leaf or breathing a wisp of smoke around a fire 10,000 years ago left nothing behind for us to dig up. The brazier survived because stone and wood and the right dry conditions preserved them, but those braziers represent a practice that was clearly already sophisticated, already ritualized, already refined. Nobody's first encounter with the plant looks that developed. The Pamir ceremony wasn't the beginning. It was a late, polished chapter of a relationship that had already been going on for a very, very long time. So the truthful answer is earlier than we can prove, and probably much earlier than you'd think. The first human to feel their mind change from this plant did so in a moment that left no trace, somewhere on the steppes or in the mountains of Central Asia, thousands of years before anyone built a brazier or dug a grave. We can't see that moment, but we can see its long shadow, stretching all the way to us. Because that is the part I want to leave you with. When you trace this all the way back, you're not looking at a modern habit or a recent controversy. You're looking at one of the oldest relationships our species has with the living world, a relationship built on a lock and key that were fitted together before we were even here to notice. Our ancestors met a plant that happened to speak the chemical language of the human brain, and they responded the way humans always respond to the profound and the mysterious. Not with a shrug, with ritual, with meaning, with reverence. They carried it into their most sacred spaces and laid it beside their dead. The plant hasn't changed. That same ancient chemistry, that same lock and key, is running in every version of this story, from a brazier in the Bronze Age mountains to the present day. What has changed is us, the meaning we wrap around it, the container we put it in, or don't. Our ancestors would probably find it strange that we stripped away all the ceremony to them. This wasn't a casual thing, it was a doorway to the dead, and they never ever walked through a door like that without knowing exactly why they were opening it. So here is my question for you. When you think about our ancestors treating this plant as sacred, as a bridge to the spirit world rather than a casual indulgence, does that change how you see it? I'm genuinely curious how that lands for you. Let me know in the comments. Until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.